Welcome back to AU Family Channel, and thank you so much for being here. It truly means the world to have you as one of our loyal listeners. If our stories have ever touched your heart, we are so grateful that you keep coming back to spend this time with us. So find somewhere comfortable, take a slow, deep breath, and let us begin today's story, together. We lived 400 kilometers from the nearest hospital, close enough to a small clinic in town for most ordinary things, but for anything serious the honest distance was however long it took the Royal Flying Doctor to reach us, which on a good clear evening with no headwind was a little over an hour. I was 14 the night we found out exactly how long an hour can feel when someone you love is lying still on the kitchen floor. My little brother Sam was 8, forever barefoot despite every warning, forever poking around the woodpile at the edge of the yard where the kindling was stacked, and it was there, just on dusk, that he put his hand down on something that wasn't a stick, a brown snake coiled in the gap between two logs that had every reason to be there and no reason at all to expect a child's hand. He came running to the house holding his wrist and saying it stung, and Dad, who'd grown up out here and knew exactly what a snake bite looked like even without seeing the snake, went very calm and very fast at the same time, the kind of controlled urgency I'd never seen from him before and hoped never to see again. He had the pressure bandage on Sam's whole arm within about 90 seconds. Mom was already on the radio to the Royal Flying Doctor base before Dad had finished immobilizing the arm, giving our coordinates, Sam's age and weight, describing the snake as best she could from what Sam had glimpsed, and I stood in the kitchen doorway holding a torch nobody had asked me to hold, needing something to do with my hands more than the torch was actually needed. The voice that came back over the radio belonged to a nurse named Trish, and even through static and distance her voice did something immediate to the room, slower than ours, steadier, asking Mum calm specific questions about Sam's breathing and his color and whether the swelling was spreading, giving instructions in a tone that made the instructions feel entirely manageable rather than terrifying. She told us the plane was already being prepped, gave us an estimated time that felt both impossibly far away and like the best news I'd ever heard, and then she did something I didn't expect at all. She asked to speak to Sam directly, wanted to hear his voice, and Dad held the radio handset up to his face so this stranger 100 kilometers away could talk him through being frightened. I don't know exactly what she said to him, some mix of jokes about brave boys and snakes getting more scared of us than we are of them, but I watched my brother's shoulders drop half an inch listening to her, the particular kind of calm a competent stranger can hand a frightened child that not even a frightened parent can always manage in the moment. The hour that followed was the longest of my entire childhood, Sam lying on the lounge room floor with his arm bandaged and elevated exactly as instructed, Dad timing his breathing against his watch, Mum back on the radio every 10 minutes for an update, and me doing the only genuinely useful thing available to a 14-year-old in that situation, running out every few minutes to check the horizon for lights. Trish stayed on that radio nearly the entire time, checking in, asking the same careful questions on a loop, walking Dad through exactly what to watch for that would mean things were getting worse, never once making it sound like she expected things to get worse, which I understand now was its own deliberate kind of medicine. When the plane's lights finally appeared low over the tree line, Dad had the UTA already running with its headlights aimed down our makeshift strip, the same paddock we used every muster, cleared of stock and rocks the way it always had to be for a landing, and the sound of that engine coming in low is a sound I will never stop associating with the exact feeling of relief. Trish was first off the plane, already moving before it had properly stopped rolling, and she went straight to Sam on the lounge room floor with a calm efficiency that made every fear in that room feel, for the first time all night, like it was actually in hand rather than something we were managing alone. She checked him over fast and thoroughly, asked Dad and Mum quick precise questions, confirmed the pressure bandage had been done exactly right, which she said more than once had genuinely mattered, and within minutes had him stabilized enough to move, talking to him the entire time in that same steady voice I'd first heard crackling through the radio. I rode along in the back of the Uda to the strip, close enough to watch her carry my brother onto that plane like he weighed nothing at all, and just before the door closed she looked back at our parents and told them, plainly, that they'd done everything right, that the timing and the bandage had bought exactly the margin Sam needed, which I understood even then was a kindness as much as a medical fact. Mum and Dad followed by road, hours behind the plane on roads that felt longer than they'd ever felt before, and I stayed back at the station with our neighbor, useless and wide awake until nearly dawn, replaying the whole night, the woodpile, the radio, that voice, over and over until it stopped making sense as a sequence of events and just became a single long-held breath. Sam pulled through. The antivenom worked exactly as it should have once he reached proper care, and the doctors told my parents afterward, more than once, that the pressure bandage and the early radio call had made all the actual difference, that another 20 or 30 minutes of delay could have told a very different story. He was home within the week, arms still sore, thoroughly unimpressed with the whole experience in the specific way an 8-year-old is unimpressed with things that terrified everyone around him more than they terrified him, and the woodpile got a very serious talking to from Dad about boots, which Sam mostly ignored within about a fortnight. I couldn't stop thinking about Trish, though, this voice on a radio who'd never actually met any of us before that night, who talked a frightened 8-year-old calm from 100 kilometers away and then flown straight into our lounge room to finish the job in person, and I found myself, in the weeks afterward, asking Mum more questions about what nurses like her actually did out here. It turned out the flying doctor nurses cover an area roughly the size of a small country between them, on call for exactly this kind of night, over and over, for families they've mostly never met and might never see again once the emergency passes, doing the same steady, competent, unglamorous work every single time as though each family was the only one that mattered that week. I wrote Trish a letter a few months later, care of the base, thanking her properly, and I honestly didn't expect a reply given how many families she must see through nights like ours, but she wrote back, a short warm note that said Sam's case had stuck with her too, that the ones where the family does everything right are the ones that make the job worth it. That letter sat on my notice board for years, through the rest of school, through deciding what I actually wanted to do with my own life, and I won't pretend one radio voice on one terrifying night entirely decided my future, but I also can't honestly separate the decision to study nursing from that particular night, that particular voice, that particular calm. I'm in my second year of a nursing degree now, rural health stream, with the flying doctor service specifically in mind once I've qualified, and every time I practice a skill in a clinical lab I find myself thinking about Trish's voice on that radio, steady, specific, never once letting the fear in the room win. Sam's 19 now, still barefoot more often than he should be, still fairly unbothered by the whole story except for the scar on his wrist he shows off at parties, and our woodpile still gets checked properly before anyone reaches into it, a small permanent habit left behind by one very long night years ago. I don't know if I'll ever get posted anywhere near that same base, whether I'll ever get to properly repay the debt to the actual service that saved my brother rather than just to the idea of it, but I know exactly what kind of nurse I intend to be when that radio call comes in, steady, specific, and utterly unwilling to let the fear in the room win, the way Trish was for us.